I really have no dog in this fight other than the fact that it seems like something that is juicy. So, Gerardo could use time on the sidelines. Apparently, there's a video of Geraldo Rivera, uh, doing a mock trial of the Ramsey family. I think that was in the latter part of, I think, maybe December of 96, something like that. 96, 97. I think, no, yeah, I think it was the latter part of 97, I think is what it was. Because I think that the episode that we watched was in September of 97, but I think later on in, around December or something, November, December, he came out with two episodes of the mock trial. I cannot find those episodes. If I find them, I will show them. But for now, I cannot find them. But the LA Times, this guy comes out with this article and he has a problem with Geraldo doing the mock trial. So let's walk through it. So the guy gets through some stuff about the First Amendment. He's talking about Latrell Sprewell. For those of you who don't know, Latrell Sprewell was a. I think this is actually a pretty funny line. Latrell Sprewell, he had a pretty bad temper, man. In the NBA, he had a pretty bad temper, man. Like he was very talented, but he ended up putting his hands on his coach, at one point in time, and that just really derailed his career. Um, did really bad, but basically, what this guy is kind of trying to say is that I wish we could, and then from that, you know, his point is like, well, Latrell will probably pick up another good contract and somewhere else, but he's got to sit down a little bit. But he was like, just as we're talking, because this is from a sports writer's perspective, just as we're talking about this talented writer or talented NBA guy who becomes a pain. He's gifted and he becomes a pain in our side. Also, too, is Geraldo Rivera. And so he goes into this. He goes on to say, I was thinking it would be nice if that same principle could be applied to TV. Although he didn't physically assault anyone, the guy I have in mind is a longtime offender who did commit an ugly act recently, one for which he too deserves some time off without pay. He's Geraldo Rivera, also both gifted and a giant pain. 2 weeks ago, he presided over a mock trial of the parents of murder victim JonBenet Ramsey that he spread across two episodes of his syndicated Geraldo Rivera talk show. There's no denying that the Ramseys have acted weirdly at times, and negative rumors began flying about them almost immediately after the unsolved slaying of 6-year-old JonBenet in Boulder, Colorado, nearly a year ago. Yet, an excuse for me for stressing this once more. The Ramseys have not been indicted or formally charged anywhere except on talk radio and in those expanding outposts of television that spend much of their time hemorrhaging innuendo and speculation all over the airwaves. Well, I mean, say what you want about speculation and all of that and innuendos. Say what you want about that, but people are making assumptions. If that's what you're talking about, it's not just television. People are making assumptions, and people are calling in with those assumptions. So I don't know why you guys are acting like people can't think. So this amnesiac thing has to stop. It's got to stop. Has nothing been learned from the past, from those damaging, knee-jerk, premature media lynchings in the TV age, ranging from the McMartin preschool case to Richard Jewell non-case? All of those who falsely accused protagonists appeared so guilty at the time. In a press conference Friday, the Boulder police commander now heading the investigation said that JonBenet's parents are not suspects, but remain under the umbrella of suspicion. Yeah, we still got to keep our eyes on you. Perhaps one or both of JonBenet's parents were involved in her murder. Perhaps not. Perhaps one or both will be charged and indicted this week or next month, or next century. Perhaps never. As of today, They are as innocent under the law as you or I. That's why subjecting them in absentia to a cockamamie televised mock trial, replete with 6-person jury judge, former Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Burton S. Katz. I mean, at least they went and got a judge, prosecutor, and defense attorney. Cockamamie. Whoa. I mean, at least they went and got a judge. Prosecutor and defense attorney was the absolute pits, an irresponsible, repugnant bit of stagecraft that further stigmatized them. Some of the witnesses turned out to be people, including tabloid reporters, who had trashed the Ramseys on previous Geraldo Rivera show episodes. This person is mad. He is really trying to throw them under the bus. Trying to let them know how he feels about this cockamamie, sorry excuse for a mock trial. I mean, okay. They appeared on videotape, the usual rules of jurisprudence, as always, not being applicable when the hangman is Rivera. In fact, Rivera's show skewed the outcome. Instead of making this a criminal trial, it substituted rules for a civil trial that allow a much lower standard for finding guilt instead of beyond a reasonable doubt, thereby making conviction more likely. As it turned out, the jury voted guilty 4-2. I mean, it's just a mock trial, so I mean, maybe he wanted to prove it in his civil suit. So bounced Rivera for continuing to judge and ruminate from afar, smearing people for the sole purpose of putting on a titillating, highly promotable 2-parter during the November rating sweeps. I mean, what should he be doing? It's television. Like Sprewell, give him a year off and then let's talk about it. But it doesn't work that way in a free society in which trashy, irresponsible TV talk shows and the Geraldo Riveras who host them are part of the price Americans pay for freedom of expression. Even if the spirit of the First Amendment didn't prevail, moreover, the powerful magnetism of profit inevitably would. Just as sports reporters are speculating that Sprewell will land another NBA team after his suspension, his value as an athlete overshadowing his propensity for mayhem, so too is Rivera, a commodity much too profitable to exclude from the arena. The tabloid nature of his 11-year-old daytime show notwithstanding, he began his career as a reporter in New York, then moved to ABC before leaving in a dispute and creating his own syndicated show, on which he has demonstrated great skills in an impresario of subjects hot and passionate. His record for pandering speaks for itself. Instead of being shunned by mainstream TV journalism, shunned, I guess, for this pandering, he wants Geraldo to be shunned, though he is getting embraced in some circles, and his career is now about to change directions once again. A recent bidding war for his services between the Fox News channel and NBC News was won by the latter. The 6-year contract that Rivera signed with NBC last month for a reported $24 million plus other financial perks provides him to host 4 NBC News specials a year on criminal justice and to continue as legal commentator on the Today program. In addition, he will create and anchor a news program on the CNBC cable channel, where his popular Rivera Live interview series, on which he has been relatively more circumspect than the syndicated Geraldo Rivera show, will continue to run. You can draw your own conclusions about what hiring him Rivera says about the direction of the NBC News under its president, Andrew Lack, who also oversees MSNBC and now to CNBC in prime time. As part of the deal, Rivera is giving up his syndicated talk show and you'd hope the mock trials, but he still lugs to NBC News a ton of tabloid baggage difficult to reconcile, even with a network division that has risen dramatically in the ratings by offering viewers less hard news about issues that significantly affect their lives than about JonBenet Ramsey and other such high-profile cases. Rumors that Rivera's NBC deal also would include him substituting for an anchor, Tom Brokaw, on NBC Nightly News, turned out to be false, leaving the line uncrossed for the moment. Once you cross one line, however, crossing the next is that much easier. So whatever this dude did, they didn't like it. Now I'm going to move to sort of the response years later and the showdown between John and Geraldo with Andrew Cuomo. And in this video posted by News Nation, I don't know what to expect. So here we go.
But for the first time, we have John Ramsey and Geraldo Rivera to discuss how far we've come and how far we need to go. John, thank you very much for taking this opportunity. I know how difficult this is to have to keep reopening these chapters of your life, but I know you want closure and you want the truth to come out. So thank you for being here. Geraldo, as always.
This is the most annoyed and agitated that I've seen John ever. This is the most annoyed, like right off the bat, annoyed and agitated that I've seen him ever.
What is your perspective now as we have John Ramsey here about where your head was when you did that mock trial and where you are today?
Well, mock trials and moot courts, as you know, Chris, are not that unprecedented. They're not that extraordinary. And I'll get to the conclusion they reached in a second. But let me just say to John Ramsey that I deeply apologize to you for what you and your family have suffered, how you have lost your wife to cancer, one child to that terrible car crash, and of course what happened to JonBenet, 6 years old, who would now be 34 years old, which is an incredible fact, how long this case has been front row center in the American consciousness. So when I say I am sorry, I don't apologize for my reporting. I believe that at least half the reporters and half the nation believe that the...
Oh, God! Oh, Andrew set up. Oh, God, I thought I was coming here for an apology. Cover on Geraldo.
which is an incredible fact, how long this case has been front row center in the American consciousness. So when I say I am sorry, I don't apologize for my reporting. I believe that at least half the reporters and half the nation believe that the shadow of suspicion, half the Boulder Police Department, or at least those who have not retired or those who have retired because of this case, believe it. But I don't know what happened. I just want you to know that I lament contributing to the hurt that you have endured. I don't think no one deserves to go through what you went through. That's my bottom line. And when I walk around, and it is with stories like yours in my head over the last 54 years of my career, it is a burden to me. It's a soulful burden. And again, man to man to you, I apologize, and I am sorry for everything you have gone through, John.
John,
well, thank you.
What do you have to say, and what do you want people to know about what needs to happen?
Well, we want two things to happen. You know, we've been critical of the police for 28 years for not accepting help.
And rightly so.
This case could have been solved a long time ago, in my opinion, had the police not immediately focused on Patsy and I and only focused on Patsy and I. You know, we accepted that and told them, look, okay, we understand that. We are in the house, so we're suspect. But don't stop there. And they did. And in fact, they released, I haven't seen this documentary, so I don't know fully what's in it, but they documented, I think, the police fed false information, misleading information to the media about our potential guilt before even the evidence had been recovered and looked at. And their theory was that okay, we think it's one of the parents. It's always the parents. We just don't know which one. So let's bring intense pressure on both of them. The innocent one will turn the guilty one in. Case solved. That was the whole strategy. That was confirmed to us by the DA several years later. That was their strategy to solve the case. They knew the answer. They just didn't know which one.
Why would the DA be telling you that? Why? Stop for a second. I get good. We all know good cop, bad cop. I get that. We all know that. What I'm confused about, because they could have used any other tactic in the world. They could have used a combination of good cop, bad cop, whatever. What I'm confused about is, why would the DA be coming and talking to you about their strategy? You see what you say out loud? You see what you say out loud? Who would you be talking to? What DA would you be talking to be like, hey, by the way, you do know that we were trying to divide and conquer. You know, we were trying to separate you guys, and that's what we were trying to do. Why would that conversation come up? Who would have started that conversation? But you're saying this like this makes perfect sense. It's perfectly normal for these conversations to be happening. How would that conversation come about? Who would have started it? You walk up to the DA, don't know what you're doing. You walk up to the DA and you're coming and you say, hey man, how's my case going? And the DA is like, and you guys start having lunch, and they stop and say, you know what, John, I always thought you were a nice guy. And really our job was this. And, the strategy that they were trying to follow was to divide and conquer. What you're telling me when you do that and you have that conversation, if that is what the DA is telling you, that means that they're moving into bias and saying, okay, you're a nice person. I really like you. Sure. Maybe they're nice people. But we're not asking whether you're nice or not. I'm asking, did you do it or not? That is my question that I need answered. Did you do it or not? Or did anyone do it?
Intense pressure. One of them, the innocent one will confess or turn the guilty one in, and case will be solved. That'd be easy. And of course, the media ran with it big time. It was juicy and sensational, and it was pretty bizarre in our country. This would not happen in England. People go to jail for what was done in our case. Police releasing false information, the media running with it, trying us in the court of public opinion. That's.
We're not in England, John. Stop using that. Like, that's not even true. That's not even true at all. I'm wondering where you get this stuff from. You just start saying stuff and it's like, where is that true at? And you just keep saying stuff that's like, even though people have refuted it, you just keep saying it. That is not true. Where are you getting this stuff from in the first place? What did you see on television?
Primitive behavior for society, and the media was disgraceful, quite frankly, in our case. But they were fed by a even more disgraceful police department, and
how were they fed, John? I got to stop you. How were they? In what way? In what way were they fed, John? How were they fed? Weren't you guys the first to go to the media? We started off with you. We just report this story. Hey, there's a little girl that's been killed. We need to find out more about the facts of the case. But hold on. Their parents don't want to talk to anyone. The parents are giving people trouble because relatively quickly, things got hostile. Things got hostile from day one when your non-attorney, pro bono attorney, jumped up and said, we need to protect you from the police because they're going to think it's you. They're targeting you. You said that. That mindset was in Mike Bynum's head from day one. And he said they target the parents from day one. That's when it started. So when you start talking to me about early in the investigation, these guys did this and that, from day one, you guys targeted me, and that was too early. But I didn't have time to do anything. John and Patsy, they didn't have time to do anything. And so really what we're hearing is the more you dig into this case, the more you hear, it's like soft. It's like a softness. It's like if you watch football and you understand some of the current things being said about Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, and how they're talking about how he's super soft and you can't really, sack him. You have to pick him up and lay him down and cover him with a blanket and give him a pillow and read him a nighttime story. And you have to, you can't tackle him real rough because it's football. You have to, take good care of him. And it seems like that's the treatment that, John and Patsy wanted throughout this investigation, which they were given that treatment up until the cops were like, I don't know if I can go along with this. And that's all I'm saying, man. Like,
you had said at the time, and this is unusual. Geraldo will know this even better than I. Very rare for a local police department that does not have a lot of experience processing these kinds of cases to reject outside help, especially from the feds. Usually it's a statewide task force, but for the feds to come in and offer resources and it be turned away is almost unprecedented. Quickly, John, you believe that the DNA that they had available at the time now has new processing application, and you want that done. Explain.
Let me first say, Geraldo, I accept your apology and thank you. What we want done, there's two things we want done. We want the evidence that has been previously tested and never tested. We think there's some that has never been tested. We don't know that for sure, but it appears that's the case. We want that resampled by one of the cutting edge labs that's out there. It's not going to, the government, I don't think, has the technology yet to do it. An Othram Labs, a Bodie Labs, those are really cutting edge labs. Bodie did the original testing back in 1997. They came up with unidentified male DNA, still unidentified. The police, that was a real problem for the police because they already decided that we were the killers. Like, how do we explain away this unidentified DNA? And they tried for a long time to find an innocent explanation. The reason we need to retest is in order to, it plays into the second thing we want done, and that is to use this familial genealogy research approach to find the killer. And that's been wildly successful in some old cold cases. To do that, they need it. It's fascinating what's been done. But to do that research, they've got to have a different format for the DNA than what was submitted to the federal database. And I don't.
It's like people just get on camera and say anything. Could you think for a second what we're talking about when we say some of this stuff? Let's assume that the one hair that they found on that cover was from a male. Let's assume it was. I think they said Kohler had sort of disproved that. I don't know how I feel about Kohler, not because I'm not saying he's reputable. He's not reputable, but I just don't know how I feel about him being the only one to break that information. So I'm hesitant. But this is what I will say, and what I understand about DNA. When you have a limited piece of DNA, like one strand of hair, and you can use it up. You can use that DNA up. Like you take a piece and you test it. You can use that up. And so after a while, you keep testing and retesting, you're not going to have any more. So what if we use that and we retest? And if you watch true crime shows a lot of the time and they come across this, they'll say, man, and even some cold cases I remember seeing, they were like, man, we just had this last strand of DNA, or we had this last piece of DNA, and we said, you know what? Let's test it. And they said, thank God it came out and it matched. But what we don't consider is that that's the story that worked out and was covered, right? We don't consider maybe all of the stories where they did that. They pulled the trigger on the last piece of DNA that they had, and it didn't work out and it didn't match anybody. So it went back into the cold case files and they had to turn around and tell the family, that's all we got of that. And anything else from the DNA, pool, I think they said they had like 30,000 pieces or something like that. Anything else from the DNA pool would be, if it has nothing to do that we can pull, it's meaningless. You know what I mean? Like if you might have a shirt that JonBenet wore, you know what I mean? But like retest that for what? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, sure, we can retest that, but it came out of her closet. How likely is that? Oh, well, maybe the killer was in her closet, touching her clothes, smelling her clothes. I mean, sure, possibly, you know what I mean? But you know, what's the percentage that that's likely? You know what I mean? Given the case that we're talking about and where the evidence is leading. Because if we go test all the shirts in JonBenet's closet, you know, we might be going on a wild goose chase. And it's just like, yo, this dude had nothing to do, whoever this was had nothing to do with JonBenet's, you know, shirts in her closet. And that's all I'm saying. That's what's weird to me, you know? So it's just like, you're just random. Like, this stuff takes a lot of money. You say that, but it's like, this stuff is wildly expensive. It's wildly expensive, and some of the most important pieces of DNA are running out. So it's easy, and if we lose that DNA, that's it. That's all we have. And I think in this case, it's more likely than not that DNA will not trace back to anyone. And if it does, it's traced, like I think Kohler said, it's tracing back to Patsy, or it could not. It's inconclusive. It's a maternal line piece of evidence. It's a maternal line DNA, I think is what he was saying, or something to that effect. So if that's where you want to kind of hang your hat on the argument. So that's what I'm saying. Like, sometimes when you just jump out here and start saying things about the DNA, it's like, yo, we might use up all of our DNA and then we get nothing, right? And then we don't have anything. And that it makes it that much harder for the police, because of under the pressure of it makes it that much harder for them to do their job. So I really wish that we would stop just throwing stuff out there. And it's like, man, could you at least understand DNA first? You know what I mean?
Understand that, but that's what I'm told. So the retesting needs to be done. Hopefully we get a good sample and in the right format, that then they could do the genealogy research. And
Right.
I believe if we do that, there's a really good chance we can solve it. But if we don't,
Well, we will be pushing for exactly that. We will stay on it. And Geraldo, first of all, I really respect what you said to John, and I really respect that you accepted it, John. You both you're both very strong individuals. Geraldo, this long after, do you believe that a case like this can be solved?
The Boulder police contradict or counter John and say that there's no test that can be done that has not been done within reason.
False.
Now, I don't
That was
know. It would
false.
seem to me 28 years later, there's no other suspect has come forward. No one, the people that they have named, the pedophiles living in Thailand and the other miserable creatures, the people who took sexual pleasure from the pictures of these children at these events that JonBenet participated in, and a lot of I think the heavy lifting that the Ramseys had in terms of their innocence was. The intruder evidence was pretty sparse. No one else has come forward as a suspect.
But they haven't done the genealogy testing that we've seen in other cases.
All I know is that the Boulder police have said they've done it. Listen,
Look,
I hope
here's the fact.
I hope this
department.
Right.
Within the last
Go ahead,
year,
make the last point, John.
An oversight committee in the Boulder Police recommended immediate termination of 5 other 7 detectives, one of whom was a detective that worked on our case. And he was a roadblock. He was worthless. He was in charge of our case for 25 years. He was a former auto theft investigator. To think that they have done all that could be done is nonsense. My hope is that the new chief will lead the department in the proper direction and get help.
We will put.
This is a common thing done in the court of law when you don't like someone. Witness smearing. If you don't like them, then you just smear their name. That's it. Could be the sweetest teacher who, taught all the little kids that came through Boulder, Colorado. And, many of them came back and said, Miss Smith, I owe my resilience and perseverance to you. You told me back in first grade that I could do it, or you told me in 5th grade that I could do it, and I owe, and ever since you told me that, I've taken that all the way through college in my business, and now look at me, I'm back here in Boulder, Colorado to give back. So thank you so much, Miss Smith. And what they will do is look at Miss Smith and they'll say, somebody will say, man, look at the impact that Miss Smith has made. And they will look at Miss Smith and say, well, look at Miss Smith. Miss Smith is, you do realize Miss Smith never had an education in early childhood, never had a degree in early childhood education. Her degree was, in early childhood. Her degree was in early childhood development, specifically in midwifery. So these kids talking about how Miss Smith had an impact on them in terms of their education cannot be trusted. And actually, Miss Smith has been a roadblock for 20, 30 years. So this entrepreneur or this high-powered attorney, they don't know what they're talking about. Because it always gets like this. It always gets like this. When we talk about a guy who is PhD, MD, psychiatrist, oh, this quack, look at this stuff, look at this. What? Got that lawyer sitting there calling that man a quack science or whatever, essentially what you're saying. He has more education than you. And probably more with the years of practice and education in general combined is more than you. What are you talking about? oh, it's quack science. I mean, you might not agree with it, say that. But to start trying to dismiss his research as quack science is like, yo, I don't agree with that. And everybody that disagrees with you is going to be quack science. Linda Arndt, oh, she's not a real detective. Oh, this guy who's been standing in the way for 20 years, he was a auto theft guy. Okay.
Push for the
I
same
wish you
thing.
luck.
I believe
wish
that the
you luck.
space between the two, Geraldo, they may have done the tests that were applicable at the time, but this genealogy research changes the shape of cases. We've seen it with ones that we're covering right now. There's no reason it could not do the same thing. In this case, it's certainly
We're
possible.
all on the same
John,
team here. We're all on the
yes,
same team here. We all want the same thing.
everybody wants the
The truth.
answer. John, I've never thought it pointed at you guys, so we'll see where it leads. And
Why would you say that? You don't know where it points, Andrew. We don't have the genealogy yet. Why are you saying that? I've never thought it pointed at you guys. Do you have evidence to back that up? No. Wait just a second now. Huh? Stop him, John. Stop him from saying that. Prevent him from saying that. If you're going to stop people from saying that you did it without evidence, then stop people from saying that you didn't do it without evidence. You are under the umbrella of suspicion. Mike Cain said, we can't rule him out. Oh, Mary Lacey, she cleared us. And people came back and said she shouldn't have. You know what Mary Lacey said to him? Well, I never thought you guys, I'm so sorry for what your family do. I never thought you guys should have done it. Mary, we told you before you put that report out, or you said what you said, it was faulty. Why would you go out there and why are y'all rushing to exonerate them so much? Like what is it with y'all? Y'all just don't have everything. Know the DNA is inconclusive. And you're rolling people out off of inconclusive DNA. DNA that you know that won't work. DNA you know won't work. That's my thing. It's like DNA you know won't work. And you're trying to rule people out off of DNA that is a mixed bag. And that's what you want me to go along with. So just to close this out, if we're talking about the process of the regular DNA testing versus the genetic portion, what they're going to have to, what's being suggested is that the FBI is going to be working with the CODIS database, which is, we bring people in, friends, family, victims, suspects, and we fingerprint them. And now that's in the CODIS database. So anybody that we run through, we, compare it, just to make sure that's what we have as police. That's what the police will have. And so when you collect DNA, you have to create like a profile. You have to create like a DNA profile. So if you think about it, if I pick up this pen and there's my DNA on it, somebody's going to have to take that DNA off, and they're going to have to make sure they identify the markers that are specific to CODIS, because CODIS reads data different than the genealogical pool. They read information differently. There's not the same. So it's like essentially two different profiles that you have to create. And so when we're creating a profile for CODIS, as I understand it, when you're creating a profile for CODIS, you have to say, okay, we're going to look for these markers and we want to try to see if we can identify this individual on these markers. It could not work. You could be looking at the wrong markers, and then CODIS will be like, oh, no, that makes sense to me. So you have to come back with different markers. But like, essentially, maybe for like if you do like send it to the lab, man, it might cost you like $250 per sample. And so that could run you, man, gets expensive. I don't know how many samples, like say at 250, say if you have like 30,000 things to test and you're just doing like one thing, you're pulling one thing from each thing, then that's like $7.5 million right there. And that's just off of like pulling a fingerprint or something off of, you know, pulling the fingerprint off of a pen. You know what I mean? Like pulling a fingerprint off of a pen and just being like, hey, okay, so I pulled my fingerprint off. What's next? So $7.5 million just for that. But then if I think about doing the genetic part, then that's going to be like $289, like probably like an average of $230 to do the genetic part, to create a genetic profile, which kind of looks at the DNA differently. It's like tracking whether through the paternal line or through the maternal line. It's tracking sort of like I don't know if you would call it mutations in DNA or the changes in DNA from one generation to the next, to kind of say, okay, I can track, you know, we can kind of see how this traveled down to the son or how this traveled down to the daughter or something like that. And essentially what happens is you make that profile that's specifically for the genetic part, and you kind of disseminate it in the genetic system and say, okay, 23andMe or Ancestry.com, you have all of these people who have taken their blood test, and they have put their DNA in here to sort of link them to these different regions. And when you take their DNA, you say, okay, it looks like your blood is showing us that, you have, connections to this region and this region and this region and this region. And that's essentially what they do. We're taking this information from this DNA sample, from this profile that we created about this strand of hair or something like that, or this fingerprint. And we're saying, okay, from this DNA that we can read, it looks like you have traces in these different regions. So if you have traces in these different regions, then you're probably this kind of person, and you're probably male. And so that in and of itself is probably going to cost you 6.9 million if you're testing 30,000 pieces. It's going to cost you 6.9 million. So if you have to do both the CODIS system and the genetic system, it's probably going to cost you like 15 million dollars to do that testing. Okay. And I have a thought on that. And then you have analysts and things like that after if you don't find a direct hit, to say, hey, looks like your blood was, or your DNA was specifically linked to somebody that is in our system. If it doesn't do that, then that's where they have to bring somebody in that can track your family tree down. That's what has to happen. And so what you're asking them to do is spend $15 million to test this stuff. But you know what John and Patsy spent their money on? Private investigators to follow people, and lawyers. They spent their money on private investigators and lawyers. The police report said that, they asked the individuals that were sort of sticking John and Patsy up, asked for $118,000, and they could have asked for $10 million and easily got it. $10 million. Now, I know that it was a different time, but can you just imagine if John could have stayed on top of the world and been successful? He could have had the $10 million to say, boom, let's do this. Let's test. Look, I got the $10 million. I got the 15 million. I got 20. Let's test it all now. Do them both. Let's test every piece of evidence. I'll pay you for it. Let's test I'll do it through my nonprofit, through an anonymous donation. Let's test it now. $15 million, $20 million. Let's do it. You know, or I mean, if you know some people who know some people, let's get a donation going. Let's do an auction. You know, let's do an art auction. You know, or something like that. And maybe some friends that you know that'd be willing to see this thing. You know, see this thing. You know, some millionaires or some billionaires who'd be willing to see this case closed and say, man, you know, we're bidding on the right for whatever. We can auction off some stuff and get $20 million and tell the police, hey, come on, let's get to it. No more excuses. That would be the process, you know, because I was like, man, how much money is it? It's almost $20 million. And so it's just like, it's easy to sit on television and say the police aren't doing their jobs and they're not doing what they want to do. When it's like, where would we get $20 million from to test for just spin on this? Like, think about that. Come on. Are they going to spend $20 million on this case alone when they have so many other things, other cases that they also have to pour funding into as well? Is that realistic? Is it? So it's almost kind of nonsensical for you to be running all over TV saying, test the DNA, test the DNA. We need to retest everything. Think about what you're saying. You're asking them to spend $7 million to test one thing because we know you want the CODIS, because you're asking them to retest. Okay, so you're asking them to retest for CODIS, for any updates there, because we don't want to miss that. But you're also asking them to test for genealogy. It's something different. That's what you're asking for. $15 million, $15 million. It's easy to just be like, oh, they don't want to do it. Oh, they're not interested. When you're not footing the $15 million bill. Like, these are things that we have to stop and think about before we say them. The cops aren't doing anything. They would have to spend $15 million. Knock, knock. Hello. Police, if whatever. Anyways, that's the video. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, drop a comment. What's on your mind? Tell me what's really on your mind. Keep it cool, keep it respectful to each and everybody in the chat, you know, and go from there. But until next video, take it easy.